You're listening to the Geek Watch Podcast, Episode 88, Dark Clouds Over Geektown.
This is the Geek Watch Podcast with Brian Hatcher and Mandy Petrie.
Greetings, Geek Watchers, and welcome to episode 88 of the Geek Watch Podcast. I'm Brian Hatcher, and with me, as always, Geek Watch's own resident geek goddess, Mandy Petrie.
Hello, Brian.
Well, today we have a conflagration of bad news, bad luck, and bad attitudes. And so we have that to talk about today. But before we get to that, did you see the Star Wars trailer?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it didn't really see any different to me, so...
there was a little bit of difference. I mean, obviously we get a lot more of the Emperor. Mm-hmm. I mean, we can certainly hear him.
Right.
And apparently everything that's been happening in the last couple of movies is exactly what he wanted to happen. That it apparently there was some grand master plan to all of this that he's been working behind the scenes to get to happen, I guess. Of course, we don't get an awful lot about the plot, but obviously I don't want to get a lot from it, you know? I think very often trailers give away too much of the movie, and this one didn't so much, but it did tease a lot more of the Emperor. I mean, we knew that he was coming, but the trailer did confirm it and has us asking some questions, so... Mm-hmm. So I'm definitely going to be interested in, of course, I'll be in the theater watching the last, this will be the last of the, I guess, the Skywalker saga. Yeah. So that, and 9 movies, which I enjoyed probably about 5 of them. So we'll see how the last one turns out. But
spanning, 5 decades now?
Yeah. 5
decades.
Well, that was the thing, of course. When I was a young man, you had to wait 2 to 3 years for a Star Wars movie. And this may be the last Star... Well, I guess, of course, with Disney Plus, you'll have Star Wars TV shows, but when we may see another Star Wars movie, who can say? But we did get some news today, since we're on trailers. We now have a definitive date when the first official trailer for Wonder Woman 1984 is going to air.
Oh, okay.
It's going to show at the Warner Brothers panel for at the Comic-Con experience in Sao Paulo, Brazil. So this will be the first time that this official trailer airs, and Gal Gadot will be there to at the panel to answer questions. So that will be the first time that anybody sees it. Now, when we'll see it, there's only we can only guess. But I'm thinking, and if you think I'm wrong about this, let me know. But I'm thinking that if I have this movie trailer that's out in December, and I really want buzz for my movie, I would be tempted to put it in front of the Star Wars film. I really would.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe that's not the play. But I would certainly. That's when I would do it.
Yeah.
So we may get our first look at the new Wonder Woman film, 1984. We might get the chance to see it in front of Star Wars, the Rise of Skywalker. So we'll see if that happens. But it seems like that would be the play. So let's talk about bad news and bad luck. I know you don't go out to see a lot of movies. Did you see Gemini Man?
No.
Well, you're like the rest of the world, apparently.
That was the Will Smith, right?
Yeah, that's the Will Smith one.
He goes back in time, or he kills himself. Goes back in time, kills himself, or there's a clone. He has to kill himself.
Yeah, it's kind of like Looper. Basically, he's an aging hitman, and they've cloned him, and so he has to fight a younger version of himself. Huh. Sounds like an interesting premise, but that's about all that anyone knows. Now, I haven't seen it either. Mm-hmm. But I did see in the news that it looks like Gemini Man is on track to lose Paramount Pictures about $75 million. And a lot of that has to do with they had to spend a lot of money, first of all, on de-aging Will Smith for, he has to play, not only does he have to play himself, but he has to play a younger version of himself. So he's acting against himself. Plus, they had to de-age him when he played his younger self. And especially if, a lot of us are familiar with what Will Smith looked like when he was younger. And so, that had to be perfect. And on top of that, Ang Lee shot the whole film in 120 frames per second, which is not typical for a film, obviously. And not most theaters can't play a film in 120 frames a second. I mean, this is, like I said, this is most of the times when you shoot at 120 frames, it's so you can slow it down for, slow-mo. But no, he shot the whole film that way. And, of course, most theaters can't play it at 120. In fact, only your best high-end televisions right now have a refresh rate that can handle 120.
See, I just imagine that, without physical film, spinning around, it just doesn't seem like it would be that big a deal, in my head. But, I don't know that much about technology. It just seems that,
whether it's a monitor or a projector, it has its own refresh rate. In other words, just like in a movie, the screen or the projection refreshes at a certain hertz. Like your typical computer monitor back in the day is like 60 megahertz, okay? And so you're limited by the equipment. So even if you've got a whether it's 80 frames a second, 120 frames a second, 300 frames a second, whatever speed the equipment can refresh the frame is how fast it can go. And so most projector equipment can't handle 120 frames a second. It can't refresh that fast. And so you can't, so you don't have a lot of studios that can project at 120 frames a second. It just can't. And so you have to basically knock it down to where the projectors can handle it. And so, but it's expensive for these cameras, obviously. So so Ang Lee spent a lot of money to get this frame rate that, for the most part, you can't show. And I mean, the film had like just, the reviews were pretty mixed, and it went up against Joker, which at this point is up to very likely be the highest grossing R-rated film of all time.
Wow.
So it hasn't beat Deadpool yet. But it's getting there. So that's the issue is it's just they spent so much money on the tech, and so much with, of course, the de-aging and the 120 frames a second. They spent so much money on budget, and of course the reviews weren't so good. I mean, that's why, even though it has made $200 million, but that doesn't cover the cost. So, if projections are good, and hopefully, like I said, it doesn't bottom out faster than people think it's going to, then it's only going to cost Paramount $75 million. But if it bottoms out faster than that, then it'll wind up costing them more. And it just goes to show not everything geeky is popular, for sure. And I mean, to be honest, I feel really bad for Will Smith. I mean, it's been a minute since he's had a really popular film.
Yeah. So was Gemini Man based on a graphic novel or a comic or anything like that?
No.
Okay,
this was original. This was
original, brand new. Yep.
Which that kind of hurts because I always like to see original stuff, get a good shot, because sometimes Hollywood can be skittish about things that don't have a really strong IP. But that's the thing about Ang Lee too, is that he can be very hit or miss. His movies either do really well or they tank. There's never any kind of a middle of the road for this guy. He's
also one of the most diverse directors ever.
Oh yeah.
Who directs House of House or Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon,
and Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah.
From Jane Austen to all the way the other end of the spectrum. Yeah.
Oh yeah. He goes all over the place, and that's the danger of being really creative, is you can have really, really good ideas.
Sense and Sensibility, forgive me. I did the incorrect one.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So you have you can either do really, really good ideas or have really, really bad ones. And yeah, like I said, he goes. I'm trying to remember what movie it was. I think he also shot it in 120 frames a second. And I don't remember the name of the film, but I know that nobody liked it. And his comment.
The first attempt at Hulk?
No, it was after that. It was Billy. I think the name of the movie was Billy something. And
Billy Elliot?
No.
Okay.
No, this is something else. I can't remember. To be honest, I can't remember what the film was, but It didn't do very well at all in the theaters, and it wasn't critically praised at all. And the way Ang Lee put it, he says, "I felt like I felt one way, the world felt the other, but to this day, I still feel like the world was wrong and I was right." And I get that. I can get that from an artist standpoint. At the other end, it's like your movies have to make money if you want to keep making them. So, but nobody's stopping Ang Lee from making films at this point. So I guess he's all right. But yeah, $75 million. That's rough. So, but again, I feel bad for Will Smith, because it seems like he's doing better on YouTube than he's doing in films. It's like, he's had some really rough films, recently. I'm trying to think of. I'm figuring that the new Bad Boys film is going to do well because it's a popular franchise, but I don't know what else he's got in the coming along. Bright didn't do very well. After Earth didn't do very well. I would have to say, Will Smith, I think he's a really good actor, and I think what's happened with him in films recently doesn't reflect what he's capable of doing. I think he's capable of, acting wise. His movies don't really reflect, I think, his talent at this point. I think that, and I don't know honestly what he needs to do. I'd love to see him in a Marvel film. I think that people might remember that he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, jump the wall. You did your stint in DC. Now come over to the other side.
Yeah, and he's not going to be in the next Suicide Squad film. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I'd like to. I think he deserves a break, and I hope he catches one for sure. But speaking of things that I haven't seen, and I know you don't watch a lot of CW, so I'll ask you this: have you watched any of the Batwoman stuff?
Nope.
Well, I haven't either. So, the obvious question is, what the heck do we got to talk about here if we've not seen it? Well, I haven't seen that, but I have been seeing a lot of this the stuff online, which I thought that this. If there was a moment where I needed some counseling and some psychotherapy from you, this had to be it. So I have been watching a lot of reviews on Batwoman, and I've seen things on Facebook, friends of mine who have seen Batwoman and have made comments on it, and none of it has been really that good.
Oh, that's upsetting.
Yeah, we've talked about it, and I thought, yeah, Ruby Rose was, when you look at her, you're like, she looks like the comic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what you think of her acting chops, that's your opinion, certainly. But, yeah, everything that I've seen, it's not been good. Now, I'm not saying it was Wonder Woman television pilot bad. And by Wonder Woman pilot, I'm talking about their last attempt to put it on television before it was made into a movie.
The one that was like 2008 or
something?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was dreadfully awful. And I
didn't see it, but I remember seeing the costume for it and people being upset. I didn't think it was that bad, but people didn't like that it was pants. And,
yeah. Well, I didn't have a problem with that either, but that wasn't close to what the problems were. There's if you go on YouTube, you can see clips from it, and you can also see there was a a review of the pilot. I can't remember who did it, but he got a chance to see the pilot, and he talks about a lot of stuff that was in it. And yeah, it was the most tone-deaf adaptation of Wonder Woman you could possibly imagine. As good as Wonder Woman the movie was, that pilot was bad. It was terrible. But yeah, Batwoman I don't think is that bad, but some of the things that I've been seeing about it, not so good. But here's what I wanted to talk about and why I wanted to bring this up. And it's not to drag the Batwoman TV show, which I think is going to be a surprise to some of the Geek Watchers, because it seems like everybody else is more than happy to drag it. In fact, I saw video after video of somebody watching the men and women. Okay, so this is not just all guys, but both men and women who watched the pilot of Batwoman and doing reactions and saying, "I know this is going to be bad. I know this is going to suck." Mm-hmm. And then they watched it and dragged it all the way through. And then on their channel, then you see they review the second show. There's only been 3 so far, and then you watch the third one, and they continue to, they're hate watching this show. Mm-hmm. You know, and I'm trying to figure out why you would do that. I understand the whole, you know, it's so bad it's good thing, and you know, watching B movies, I love doing that. But this whole thing about, if you hate it so much, why are you watching it? Uh-huh. You know,
you're still getting the ratings up, and you're still drawing attention to it from your channel. So.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think sometimes dragging something becomes a spectator sport. And, you know, if something really upsets me, I can see where I can see where you kind of fall into the dark side, and you hate something so much you just want to talk about it. And it does become very popular on YouTube to drag something, especially if everybody else is kind of jumping onto the bandwagon. And I think sometimes I fall for that trap, but I don't want to be somebody. I don't want to watch Batwoman just so that I can, so I can get on the podcast here and just trash it. I don't want to. I don't see the fun in that, and I certainly don't see the fun in subjecting you or the audience to any of that either. I guess it could be fun in small doses, but it just I thought it was so weird that people were like video after video, didn't expect a whole lot from it, didn't get a whole lot from it, but then they watched the next episode and the next episode, and they're probably going to go through the entire, how many episodes are in the season, dragging it all, the whole time. And I don't know. I can sympathize with that, but I can't follow with it. So I think part of this is to say that if anybody's wondering why we're not really talking about Batwoman, it's like there's enough people dragging it on the internet. I don't see a reason to be one of them. I mean, there's if you want to listen to people trash Batwoman, you've got your pick, I think. So I don't know if we can really need to add to that. And it looks like you pretty much agree with me on that one. Mm-hmm. So I hope it gets better. I mean, there's no benefit at all to a superhero show being on television that's not that good. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to get any enjoyment out of it if it doesn't get any better. And so. Like I said, hopefully it gets better, but like I said, we'll leave the dragging of the show to other people, because it's certainly there. But speaking of dragging, have you been keeping up with the Martin Scorsese?
Oh yes, and Francis Ford
Coppola.
Coppola, yeah, that's
yeah. So yeah, I got some opinions about that too. Mm-hmm. So. Have you been reading any of the articles? You've been
no, just pretty much know that they say that that the superhero movies aren't good movies, and they're kind of ruining what we think of as good cinema and stuff. That's pretty much what I've seen, what I know of it, and that's okay.
Well, Scorsese has a film coming out, The Irishman, which is like it's another gangster film. He loves doing the gangster films, and
Surprise.
Of course, well, he's good at it. Mm-hmm. But, you know, we're getting Joe Pesci. He's coming back to do, I mean, he's coming out of retirement to be in this film. And you got De Niro in it, and you've got Pacino in it. So it's going to be good. Mm-hmm. And, of course, he's out promoting the film. And he compared Marvel films to carnival, to rides, basically. They're just, they're theme park rides. And it's like, well,
all right.
Yeah.
People love theme park rides.
Right. But one of the quotes, like I said, I don't want to take him out of context. I'm going to quote him exactly what he said. He said, "It isn't the cinema of human beings trying to convey emotional, psychological experiences to another human being." So that's when he looks at, he said he tried to watch Marvel movies. He just can't watch them. Mm-hmm. He said, you're not dealing with people who have feelings that are dealing with other people in a kind of a real way, which makes me say, well, obviously you've not watched a lot of the Marvel movies, obviously.
Not enough. And, as a writer, I think he would understand metaphor and allegory much, in a way, in a manner that, and, when I heard, them saying those kind of things, like, my first thought is, okay, you have the wreck of the Hesperus, and then you have Casey at the bat. Now, is Casey at the bat anywhere near the prowess and the prose and the iambic pentameter of Wreck of the Hesperus? No, but we still love it. We still love Casey at the bat, and it doesn't mean that it deserves any less recognition for being something so good. We love Louie Louie, the same 3 chords over and over again. It's not Beethoven's Ninth, but we still love it, and it still is appealing to so many people, and they can relate on it so well. Just because something isn't considered what you think a piece of art should be, doesn't mean that it's not. We have Rembrandt, and then we have Schultz, with beautiful Renaissance paintings, but then Garfield, they're all art, and they all deserve a chance. If you don't like them and they're not your cup of tea, great, fine, but you can't fault humans for being able to relate to them.
Right. Well, of course, Francis Ford Coppola doubled down on this, and I like I said, to be fair, I'm going to say, I'm going to quote him so that we know exactly what he had to say about it. He said, "Martin was kind when he said it's not cinema. He didn't say it's despicable, which I just say it is." So he doubled down on it. Now, I will say this. What I find a bit ironic about Coppola and Scorsese, coming down on Marvel movies and saying, well, they're not cinema, is I remember, because I'm an old feller, I remember when their movies came out, and when basically Hollywood and the Hollywood elite at the time looked at them as the outsiders and said, what they do isn't cinema. It's overly violent, and there's no artistic merit to it. It's just a highly glossed snuff film. So they were on the other end of that spectrum, and now they have become Hollywood insiders. And this is the way, let me say, a lot of people have obviously jumped to the defense of the Marvel movies, James Gunn, Kevin Smith, even Bob Iger, CEO of Disney, had something to say about it, and respectful of basically these auteurs for sure. But Bob Iger said, can anyone look at Ryan Coogler's Black Panther and say that doesn't qualify as art? When compared to things that Coppola and Scorsese have done. He's like, no, I think that they're all artistic. And to say that, that they're artistic where Ryan Coogler isn't, he's like, I don't see it. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I believe me, I totally get that. I think one of the problems that I have with these statements is the fact that it really reeks of gatekeepership.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And gatekeepership does not play well in this day and age. It just doesn't. If there's anything, especially amongst the millennials, that doesn't play well, it's gatekeepership, because in the last 10 to 15 years, gatekeepership has really gone away. It used to be, of course, that if you wanted to get your book published, or you wanted to produce an album of music, or you wanted to make a film, you had to go through the gatekeepers. Well, that stuff is gone now. I mean, people are self-publishing, and, where self-publishing at one time was looked down upon, it's not so much now. And, of course, we host our podcast here on SoundCloud, and if you go on SoundCloud, artists all over the place are posting music on SoundCloud and getting it out, and in other places as well. And I mean, people are literally making films with their iPhones, and with places like YouTube, you can put your stuff out. So, I mean, the whole gatekeeper system, for good or ill, is going away. And when you sound like a gatekeeper, it's not a good look. And that's exactly what Coppola and Scorsese sound like. They sound like those old guys that want the kids to stay off their lawns.
Like the Abercrombie and Fitch CEO and
yeah. But, and like I said, I see that part of it. But here's the other part here's the other side that I also see is, as much as, you don't want to see gatekeeping, obviously, and you don't want to put your foot down and say, well, this is legitimate cinema and this is not. I also see the value in having a variety of films. If it's all Scorsese and Coppola, I'm not going to be happy.
I'm going to be depressed all the time.
Yeah. But at the same time, if it's all Marvel, I'm also not going to be happy. I want the whole spectrum. I mean, and I can understand where, for some filmmakers, it might be frustrating when it looks like the only movies that are getting made are superhero films. But again, if you haven't watched a lot of them, you don't see how superhero movies, have a wide berth. I mean, think about this. We talked about Joker. We've talked about Joker on several occasions on this podcast, and of course mentioned it today that it's on track to being the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time. Well, Scorsese was attached as a producer to this film at one time. I mean, let's be honest. It's a Scorsese film with a superhero veneer on it. And a thin superhero veneer at that, because nobody has superpowers. It's just, it uses characters out of a comic book, but nobody really has superpowers. And it does play like a Scorsese film. It does. And so superhero films can have that variety, but I do, like I said, I want to see Scorsese films. I want to see The Irishman. I'm interested in that film. But the thing about this too, and I find this ironic as well. The reason why Scorsese he's going to have the ability to put out this movie that was in development hell forever is because Netflix stood up and said, well, we're going to put it out.
Oh, okay.
So it's going to be out in theaters for a little while, and then it's going straight to Netflix.
Okay.
And of course, Scorsese had nothing but nice things to say about Netflix because, of course, they pulled that movie out of development hell. It's actually going to wind up in theaters. But that's the thing, is he's taking advantage of some of the changes in the world, because obviously this 20 years ago, the ability to release a film, it required going through a certain studio system, and the studio system that he's defending right now, wasn't looking to release a 3-hour movie, but Netflix didn't have a problem with it, and so things that have changed to his benefit for certain. And let's be honest, although not a superhero movie, obviously you can say that movies like the Lord of the Rings trilogy made it more palatable for moviegoers and then, of course, for Hollywood itself to release longer form films, that they weren't so desperate to cut it off at like 2 hours max, and wanting to keep it at 90 minutes if at all possible. And so I guess basically what is, I understand wanting variety in films, and I want to see the Scorsese films and the Coppola films. I want to see them, but I can see how frustrating it can be when things kind of change. And I get where and the thing is too, I think that Hollywood's fixation with superhero movies has basically come from the fact that they're making so much money. I mean, that's the thing about Hollywood, is that right now they're really insecure about their films. And so if anything makes a lot of money, everybody's going to jump on it. Everybody. Everybody's looking to do these series films. They're trying to get these franchises. Every studio's trying to do it because it's making a lot of money, and they need to, when you're a studio that could possibly lose millions of dollars on a film if it doesn't, going back to Paramount, if you have that, when you're taking those kind of risks, you got to have huge payoffs to balance it out. And so I can see, and again, you have people on the one side of it, like Jodie Foster and of course, Coppola, and, where they feel like this is it's really damaging Hollywood, is that it's limiting the types of stories that you can tell. But I mean, obviously it doesn't. I mean, we still, the Joker, Joker is us, it is very much an art film in a lot of ways. And so I think that there's definitely room for different things. And I think especially now that you have streaming services that are willing to put out films and release them in theaters, I think that there's actually more opportunity. And all you really need to do is create something that people want to see. And I think the opportunity is there. I think you don't have to like superhero movies. I think it's going maybe a little bit too far to think that it's going to limit any filmmaker from making the kind of film that they want to make. Like I said, I mean, we're getting a 3-hour gangster movie, and if he were, honestly, if he was cut off from being if any movie was going to be, not able to be made at all and restricted, it'd be a movie like that. Because sitting in a theater for 3 hours can be a bit of a chore for sure, regardless of how, what kind of movie you're talking about. So I don't think I think that they overestimate how limited Hollywood might be for them right now. But, like I said, I mean, I think superhero movies can be high art, and some of the Marvel movies are certain. I'm not saying they're all high art, but I would put Black Panther ahead in front of any film as far as its storytelling ability, just the real heart of the movie, and just the depth of the storytelling. I mean, I would. So honestly, I figure you probably feel the same way about it. I mean,
we do. We need the Godfathers. We also need Titanic, and we also need Troll 2. We need all the vast,
right.
All these, I don't care for like kind of the Adam Sandler comedies, but I know they make people happy, and that's just one part that I don't like. And
yeah. Well, I mean, you're not going to
need something for everyone.
Well, you're not going to like everything. Mm-hmm. No, people don't like, not every movie is made for every person. They talk about, in Hollywood, the 4-quadrant where it hits everybody. And superhero movies can do that. I think that's part of their strength, is they can create those 4-quadrant films. And the thing is, when you're doing more artistic films, they're not going to be those 4-quadrant films. Because they're not going to appeal to everybody, but you're not trying to appeal to everybody. You're trying to tell a particular story. And regardless of what artist that you are, I've always told this to writing students, is that between the artist and the audience, there are 2 packs. There's 2 promises that are made, okay? And as an artist, you have the right to create whatever art you want to create, in the way that you wish to create it, in the frequency you wish to create it. And it's not any of the audience's business how you do that. They have no say in that whatsoever. You may wish that George R.R. Martin published faster and could write faster, but he publishes at the speed that he wants to. and the audience doesn't really, they may be anxious for his stuff and very eager, but you don't really have a say on that. When the artist creates, that is their purview, and the audience really doesn't have a say in it. Now, the other part of it is once that art has been released, the audience can view that art in any way that they choose to. They can like it, they can hate it, they can say whatever they want about it, they can feel however they want about it, and it's none of the artist's business how they take it. Their part of it's already done. Once it's been created and put out there, that's their business. How the audience accepts it, that's their business. And so, as an artist, having the freedom to create what you want to create is powerful. But at the same time, if you're going to be that artist, you have to be willing to accept whatever audience your art is able to garner. And you can't be upset that it doesn't, that it doesn't move maybe more people or whatever. I have friends who are writers who I think are amazing writers, and they write what you might call extreme horror, very graphic horror. Now, as good, as great of writers as they are, they're never gonna be New York Times bestselling authors, and the reason for that is because, of course, their stuff is way too graphic, and it's not going to have a wide appeal. But for them, but they don't have a problem with that because they're getting to create the art that they love for people who love it, and it might not be a huge breakout hit, but that is the choices that they make. And I think if you're going to be an artist, you have to be willing to accept whatever size audience you get for whatever you create. And that's the price that you pay for creating what you want to create.
Banksy breaks the law to create the art that he wants. Thomas Kincaid is hanging up in every hotel on Earth. So
right. But that's the thing. Now, but also to say is that the worst thing that an artist can do is create something they don't want to create because they think it's going to make them popular. That's the worst thing you can do, because the minute you start chasing that stuff, once you're trying to please everybody, you're not pleasing anybody. The truth is you can't create massively great art for the masses for the most part. I will say that, because if you let's be honest, the meal that appeals to the widest amount of people is the blandest meal. If you got to appeal to everybody, it can't be too salty, can't be too spicy. Probably can't put meat in it because you'll have vegetarians. So if you want to create something that's really powerful art-wise, it may, especially in the beginning, have a limited audience. A lot of great art movies were considered flops at the beginning, and only through time did they
get cult status.
Yeah. Well, and even sometimes not even that. I mean, think about this. Wizard of Oz was considered a flop, and of course now is considered a beloved movie. The only reason why It's a Wonderful Life has any kind of popularity at all, because it was considered such a flop that it broke up a partnership of between a director and an actor that used to work together a lot and never worked together again, because that's how bad the movie did. Basically, the movie was so bad, the studio let it drop into public domain because they thought nobody's ever going to want to watch this film. And that way, because it was in public domain, it didn't cost anything for stations to play it on TV, and people watched it and loved it. And now it is a holiday classic. But basically, I think ultimately with this situation is I think as moviegoers, we definitely want to see a wide variety of different films. And no matter how much you love pizza, if you eat it every day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you can get tired of it quickly, for sure. And so having a wide variety of different kinds of films out there is of course going to be good. But I don't know who of us it really has the ability to say, well, this is art and this is not. This is the type of film that should be made. This isn't. And I'm certainly not a genius, but I think even people who are genius in cinema, like Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola, I don't even think I don't think that that's really their place either. Just make the kind of films you want to make and put them out there. And because the thing is, as much as you might hate, what modern society has become as far as films, it's also opened up new venues to allow you to put your art out there. So, take advantage of that. I think, honestly, like what you like, hate what you hate, but at the end of the day, if you don't like what's out there, make something that you want to see and try to develop an audience that way. So, well, before we go, let's talk a little bit of What the Dead.
What the Dead.
So,
yeah.
Let's episode 3 was called Ghosts. Now, I know that you saw the television version of it, but I discovered, of course, I have AMC Premiere, and I discovered that there was a extended version of it. They put out an extended version on Premiere, so there was, I want to say maybe like 5 or 10 minutes of extra footage. Okay. Not a lot of stuff that was different from the TV show. There was a couple places where they extended the conversations. One was, of course, when Daryl and Michonne were talking. They were talking about Carol, and she seemed to be going off the which we will definitely talk about. Mm-hmm. But Michonne makes a comment in the extended scene that yes, Alpha does need to die. And the other piece that I noticed that was extended was, of course, between Aaron and Negan, when they were having their moment.
Oh yeah, when when Aaron couldn't see and
right. Mm-hmm. But the argument that they had before that.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Where Aaron was like, "Are you telling me that the love of my life died and that was my fault?" In the regular television, it cuts to him basically going after Negan and talking about his wife. But if you remember, Negan didn't want to get into that conversation. He says, "You're not strong enough to hear the truth." And when in the extended version, when he said, "Are you telling me that he died because I couldn't protect him?" Negan looks at him and goes, "I told you weren't strong enough to hear the truth." So that sets you get that moment that sets it off even more. Mm-hmm. Now, the one long extended scene that's in there is that there's a scene between Rosita and Gabriel. And this is, in the middle of them fighting off all the walkers that are at the gate. And then she's got, she's getting ready to go to the gate and lend a hand. And Gabriel stops her and says, "Where are you going?" He says, "Well, I'm going to defend the gates." He said, "Look, you can't do that. I mean, we have a child, and you are literally the only person who can feed this baby." Mm-hmm. So he basically tells her, "Look," he looks at her and goes, I'm tired, and I don't have time to argue. Just stay home." And he walks off. Mm-hmm. So that plays in later on because, of course, things get really heated for sure, and we'll definitely talk about that as we go into the all the spoilers. But so that really played off, and you could see why, especially later on, why something that Eugene says to her really sets her off. Mm-hmm. And we'll definitely talk about that scene. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about the setup for the episode. Of course, we have wave after wave of walkers approaching Alexandria, which of course they immediately assume is the Whisperers. Right. And although Lydia's saying, "No, that's not the way Mom would work," but nobody believes her. Yep. But we get this moment of fighting going on, and then Carol. I mean, that was one of the main plot thrusts in this episode was, of course, Carol is slowly going insane because she's keeping herself awake with caffeine pills. So, but
she's pulling a Jesse Spano.
You're not the first person to say that. But yeah, that's exactly it. And And
she's having all kinds of hallucinations.
Right, which is interesting because now you get this situation, in literature we talk about the unreliable narrator. So there's a lot of things that happen in the show, that you're wondering, well, what really happened and what didn't.
Right. You get this really excited because we know very little about like Daryl's past.
Yeah.
And you get little snippets like every 3 years or something, and you think, oh, well, we get to learn more about his bastard father who was a truck driver, and nope,
nope.
Turn around, not real.
Yeah. Imagine the whole damn thing. And of course, you get that moment at the end where you're starting to doubt, that she was ambushed, and it turns out no, that part was real.
That happened. Mm-hmm.
That happened. So now we have a walker walking around in a walker skin because apparently the whisperer, the whisperer who was sent to take care of Carol, but of course that means Alpha is definitely looking to have her done, and which makes perfect sense. But here's the irony of that the whole scene, of course, that we're up on when they're up on the hill and there's the post, where the heads were left, and the what marked the territory, and you have that moment where Carol brings a gun to a knife fight.
Yep.
And almost shoots Alpha, except that
Michonne stops her.
Well, Michonne, actually it was Daryl that grabbed her first.
Oh, okay.
What makes this rough is, if you guys remember, is of course when we see Negan for the first time, why did Glenn die? Because Daryl took a swing at Negan. So he's the one who basically prevents Carol from doing what he did. Mm-hmm. Because he saw what happened.
Yep.
So.
And they're standing right there in front of Henry's pike. It's really sad.
Yeah, it's. But and you feel so bad for Carol because you can see why, especially when you see the dream she's been having. You can see why she's, why she doesn't want to sleep, and she's carrying an egg timer, and that was the thing about it was with the kitchen timer. When I first saw it, I thought that was really weird. I'm like, she was using it as an alarm clock, and I'm like, that's only like an hour. How is she getting any kind of sleep? Because she's using a timer for. Did they jury rig the timer that it goes slower? She couldn't possibly be getting any sleep, and she's not getting any sleep. So
yeah, it was definitely especially in the dream sequences that none of the clocks had hands. The watch didn't have hands, and then you have the egg timer that's not doesn't have hands. It just ticks, and So it was a very cool episode in that respect.
Oh yeah. But yeah, so you have all those things with her, and you know that something's going to have to happen for sure, because obviously she has drawn the attention of Alpha, and it's like we've been saying on this podcast many times, we want to see what happens between Alpha and Carol.
Yeah, but I don't want it to happen because Carol's gone all batshit and stuff.
Yeah.
I want her to be clear-headed. I want her to know what's going on and have a Carol plan going on. Set off a rocket and burn down Terminus kind of plan. I want her to be fully thought out and take some vengeance.
Oh yeah. Well, I guess the thing is, of course, now she's out of those pills. So unless she can find some more caffeine pills, she's having to sleep. And of course, she's at the end of the episode, she slept, and of course she had those horrible dreams, which was, what's interesting about that dream, what makes it so horrible is it's so hopeful. It's not like she's having nightmares. She's seeing good things in her life, things being back to normal, and even, Henry being there. And then you have to wake up and realize, nope, none of that's real.
Right.
That could be worse, than a nightmare. Well, and the other thing too, the home ec book, when they were in the high school, when she looks at that book and it's like all the kids that, wow, that was messed up. There she is holding the turkey, and there's Henry, there's Sophia, that was just absolutely just messed up that whole bit of it. I was like, oh God, that's terrible. But the other thing I wanted to talk about that episode, and definitely wanted to talk to you about this, Mandy, because I've noticed that a lot of different people have different opinions about this whole thing, but we definitely have to talk about Rosita and Eugene.
Oh,
yeah. Yep. So, so what did you make of that scene? Let me ask you that.
I mean, it's very much, it's the first, I guess, first guy to admit, yeah, I was in the friend zone and I was trying to wear you down and stuff like that. And it's the first person on screen to admit that he was wrong by doing that. Yeah. And, it's no When Harry Met Sally, and it's no Pretty in Pink and stuff like that. And, and to admit that, yeah, no, the friend zone does not exist. It was my fault and I was just a bad friend. And,
yeah. Well, that's the thing. Especially a lot of young guys, they get this idea that there's only really two types of ways that relationships work. It's like that's the one night stand thing where you're going and, it's just sex. And then the other side of it is, of course, that you have to develop a friendship first to prove that, that this is not a one night stand. And then, then the sex comes later. It's like a relationship is friendship plus sex. You get a little bit older, you kind of get away from that. But, definitely, I mean, Eugene, when he says, I wasn't listening to the no, I think, again, not that we're going to necessarily start getting into relationship advice, but I find that it's really interesting that you get such a kind of a clear picture of some of the problems that sometimes guys have in relationships about, one, not getting a vague answer from someone because they ask vague questions and thinking that means a maybe. They don't, because the thing about it is, whether they admit or not, unless they don't really understand women at all, the thing is, when a woman says no, she doesn't change her mind ever. That's the thing. If and you can, if I'm wrong about this, you can tell me. But it just seems to me that if she's not at least 50 to 55% interested in you, when you first meet, you don't have there's no prayer. There's no chance at all. There's never been any kind of a situation where somebody was like, just, and I think this is the same thing if there's a woman with a woman or a man with a man, if there's not some sort of an attraction going on right off the bat, it's not really going to change.
There's the scene in Dumb and Dumber where, she's saying, no, absolutely not. No. Not in a million years, if you were the last man on earth. And then he says, so you're saying there's a chance. Yeah. I mean, that's every single one of them. And, and the fact that he admits that he was a bad friend. But if you go back to, think about when they first came on the show, he was spying on Rosita and Abraham having sex. Yeah. And I guess obviously they didn't mind that. Maybe they were exhibitionists, which is fine because they never called him out on it or told him to stop. But I don't know about the foundation, but.
Well, the other thing too, and in a sense, this is really, I would call this backhanded slut shaming in a way. Is, I mean, you look at Rosita, and I mean, especially if you have a very fragile male ego, if you're looking like Rosita, where she was in a relationship with Abraham, she had a fling with Sadiq, she's now with Gabriel. It's like over the course of a few years, she's had multiple people that she's been with.
She was interested in the mayor's son. Forget his name, but
yeah. So you have all that. I mean, if you've got a fragile male ego, it's like, oh, she's interested in all these other people, but not me. So that can, sometimes, like I said, for a fragile male ego, that could be worse, where she's had multiple partners. You're just not one of them. Then it might be a little more palatable to take if, if she's with one person and has stuck with that person, he or she, whoever that is. That it's easier to take than it would be that she's jumped around a little bit, but just not you. But that one scene where he's where Eugene is asking about the baby, and putting himself out there as somebody who is trying to protect her. Especially I would say specifically, when you see the scene between Rosita and Gabriel, you can see why that really struck a chord.
Oh, the extra scene.
The extra scene, why that was rough, because and again, not that I can say that I can speak for all women, but I do get the feeling, and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that sometimes it can be rough when, as a woman, you have all these things you're interested in, you have all this potential. How rough that can be when you become a mother and suddenly that's all that you are. Mm-hmm. And obviously Rosita was feeling that in a huge way because, again, she taught Eugene how to fight. She's defended herself. She's defended her community. And now because she's a mother, she's not allowed to do any of that anymore. Mm-hmm. And I get this. It's like, the whole comment about, you're literally the only person who can feed this baby. Well, I get it. It's like formula is not, I'm guessing, very difficult to come by in the apocalypse. And so breastfeeding is pretty much the only option that baby has. But again, I can see why, especially somebody like Rosita would be upset about, this thought that, well, she has a child now, so she has to be put to the sideline. She can't contribute anymore. She's a mother first, and everything else has to. I can get where that could sting. Certainly because, certainly Rosita is somebody who can carry her own weight for sure, and to be told, well, you're not allowed to do that anymore. I can see where that would certainly be rough on her for sure. But that was the thing, that the moment when Eugene had his moment of clarity, as he put it, and realized, I really screwed up here, because I thought
I was being a good friend, but it turns out I was just being a shitty friend. Yep.
Yeah. Well, like I said, especially for young guys, this idea that, if I can be friends with somebody long enough, maybe their thing,
if I can do enough for them, I took care of your kids, so, don't you owe me kind of stuff. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the dark side of it. And like I said, and as a young guy, I fell into that. Certainly I did, because again, you're thinking that by being their friend, you're basically proving that you're going to stick by them, and that this is not some sort of a fling. You're not looking at them just as an object or whatever. But at the same time, the dark side of that is a weird quid pro quo. Really, it's like, look what I've done for you. Like me. And especially, like I said, when you're young, and you're a guy, you get this idea that sex is the way that you show somebody how deeply you care about them. Is that's the thing about it, is that's the moment where they will understand. If you can get them to there, they will understand.
From the time you're a kid, it says, when two people love each other very much, and that's not true. It's like you are going to, you're going to be with a lot of people that you don't love. Love has nothing to do with it.
Right. But yeah, there's that thing. It's like, if you can get them there. I mean, I'm sure that in the 50s and the 40s, that marriage was that finish line. But now, marriage is not that, but maybe that sexual experience, that's, if I can get to that point, then she's going to understand how I feel about her, and it's going to make sense, and she's going to care, because she's going to see that how good of a person I am, how much she means to me. And again, like I said, usually in situations, like I said, if within the first few moments, I think, there are decisions being made that you're not going to go back on. I mean, you can tell me, have you ever been uninterested in somebody and then they wore you down and you suddenly started liking them?
I can't recall.
Yeah, I don't think so. I certainly have. That's never happened to me, where I wasn't interested in somebody and they wore me down and I fell in love with them. It doesn't work that way. So, And it's not, again, it's not about, trivial things. I think human beings, in some ways we can be very observant when we don't realize that we are. And there's just, some people just don't mesh with people. That's it. And you can care deeply about somebody who just does not feel that way about you. And I think it's kind of funny because, saying that, it just reminds me of what we were talking about with as far as artistry is concerned. On your side, you can create, you can feel however you wish to feel, but that doesn't obligate anybody else to anything. You can choose to love anybody that you want to love and feel about them any way that you want to feel about them. But that doesn't obligate them to reciprocate or do anything. And that was a moment where Eugene had, like I said, that moment of clarity where I think that he realized something that maybe not a lot of other guys do. I think a lot of other guys spend their entire lives not realizing that
and without feeling like, oh, I just wasted my time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, and the other part of it too is that, and I'm not going to say just guys, males and females, because it's not just heterosexual relationships. But anytime you're in a relationship with somebody that in a different circumstance could have turned romantic, but just didn't, those friendships can be problematic. And specifically with, I can tell you, a situation where, I have male friends and female friends, but being single, I can do that, because. But at the same time, if I've been in relationships with people, with ladies, and I totally get this. They're fine with me hanging out with my male friends, but they sure as hell are not fine with me hanging out with female friends, regardless of how long I've known them and how platonic it is, or even if they have boyfriends or husbands or whatever.
Yeah, that's not, that's anytime the phrase he won't let me, she won't let me enters into a relationship, you are not in a relationship of equality anymore. Now you are in a relationship of abuse. So if, he won't let me go, go hang out here, she won't let me go, play cards with my buddies. That's,
right.
Now you're not in a relationship anymore. You're in a power struggle.
Well, and I agree with that. But at the same time, I can also see where somebody I'm in a relationship with might have some questions about if hanging out with another female. I can see that. And especially I would say if this was somebody who was in a situation where they had been cheated on, and I care about them, I don't really want to put them in a position where they feel like they're going to get hurt again.
Oh, well, once you've answered those questions and then they still can't trust you, then that becomes a problem that, if you decide that, that's that you're willing to feed into those fears and stuff rather than working on them. I mean, that's a boundary, you have to choose to cross. But
oh, yeah. Well, like I say, I mean, and so, that's kind of the danger you run into whenever you're in a relationship is, obviously in a relationship, you can't just take your own feelings into account. You have to account for the other person. Like I said, I can understand why if I'm in a relationship with a woman, if I'm hanging out with some other woman, and I just say they're friend. I mean, it's like Bismarcky, you got what I need, but you say he's just a friend, that song. It can be, like I said, relationships can be complicated, and that might, like I said, it seems like all mine have always been difficult. I'd love to, maybe there's a possibility of one being simpler. It's just never been my experience for sure. But yeah, I mean, relationships can be really complicated, but they really become complicated when you put feeling requirements on the other person, because that just never works.
You can't let someone's past experiences manipulate you.
Right.
Into certain behaviors.
Right. And you can't adopt certain behaviors to try to attract somebody else, which I know a lot of guy friends that I know fall into that trap. They're like, what is she, if she's into this, if I show an interest in this, she'll show an interest in me. And it's like, it's just easier to find somebody who likes the same stuff you're in, that you can be, that you can be the person you are without having to put on any kind of an act or a mask or pretend to be somebody that you're not to be interested in them. Because even if it were to work, what happens the minute they get to know you a bit better and find out that part of you isn't true? If that's the part of you they were interested in, now it's gone, what's going to happen, right? But yeah, it's amazing how much that one little scene between Rosita and Eugene, how much it had to say about a very complicated issue, but between partners, and the fact that Eugene had the wherewithal to be able to say, yeah, I really screwed up here, and I was doing things for the wrong reason. I thought, usually they say in writing, it's when a character says exactly what's on their heart, it's bad writing. But I think under this circumstance, the fact that he had this epiphany and was able to say it in the way that he said it, I thought was, like I said, that scene really struck me, especially because, even though I'm no longer a young man, I remember what I was like when I was, and I'm like, oh, this looks familiar.
And I think, we're kind of finally getting out of that. And, once it, now, teaching kids is like, okay, well, if she says no, don't keep trying, don't try again, to let her be. And, if he cheated on his girlfriend with you, then he's going to cheat on you when you are his girlfriend. And so I think we're working on getting out of that. And this was some good commentary on it.
I don't know how fast we are, because I mean that is the danger with a lot of young heterosexual males, is that they look at somebody and they fixate on them. They're like, that's the one, and they ignore all warning signs, and they just fixate on that one person. And I've talked about, I was in a really bad abusive relationship, and there were situations that opened up for me where I could have went somewhere else. People who were interested in me as me, and I just let it go because of the fact that I was fixated on this one person, and that.
Because any attention was attention.
Yeah, exactly. And there you go. So we're all human beings when it comes down to the end of the day. So, but like I said, that's why I thought that scene in particular was pretty telling.
Striking chords everywhere. And there was a lot to be learned. Hopefully, we happen to learn that. But next week, though, Silence the Whisperers is the next episode, which is being directed by Michael Cudlitz, whom we remember as Abraham. Oh,
this
excellent.
is the second episode he's directed. The first one, of course, was Stradivarius. He directed that, which was his directorial debut, and of course he directed. And he's going to be doing one more episode. I think it's episode 7, called Open Your Eyes, which is the one right before the mid-season finale. So that's one thing I love about Walking Dead, is that it's been giving people who've wanted to direct the opportunity to do so. Of course, Greg Nicotero, who really blew up in a directing career starting out, of course he did a lot of second unit directing in movies, but being able to take the lead chair in a lot of these episodes. Of course, he directed the first 2 episodes of season 10. But being able to direct more, because that's always been his passion, is to get more into the directorial side of things, and he's had a chance to do that. Now, of course, Michael Cudlitz is getting a chance to step in and do it, and which I think is fantastic. So, of course, one other thing is, of course, HBO, they've started the WATCHMAN TV series, which eventually we're going to have to talk about. But I don't really want to get into doing like a show by, an episode by episode breakdown like we do with. Probably it'd be best to watch the whole thing from start to finish, and then maybe do a review about it then. Yep. But of course, this weekend we get Zombieland Double Tap.
Oh yeah.
So definitely we can talk about that next week for sure. Are you planning on seeing it this weekend? Do you think?
I don't think so. I hadn't thought about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, eventually we can talk about that. I probably will wind up seeing it sometime this weekend if I get the chance. It looks like it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm definitely looking forward to talking about it with you when we're back on the podcast. And so, with that said, we come to the end of episode 88. Thank you for listening, and tune in next week for the latest in geek news and views with the Geek Watch podcast. From Andy Petrie, this is Brian Hatcher, reminding all the Geek Watchers out there, we're all geeky about something. Be proud of yours. See you next time. Thank you for listening to the Geek Watch podcast. If you enjoyed this program, don't forget to like and subscribe on your preferred platform and share this podcast on your social media. For links to all the ways you can listen to the Geek Watch podcast, as well as leave comments and suggestions, visit our website at geekwatch.net. The Geek Watch podcast is a Hanging J production.